The order, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder?
Here.
Whitman? Here. Stillgrave?
Here.
Vining? Germaini?
Here.
Lamore?
Present. So we have our work session items today. We have 3 items. Mr. Pastu, if you want to start us, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to have Assistant City Manager, Finance Director Ed Self do the introduction for our fiscal year 21-22 audit.
Honorable Mayor and Council, Ed Sell, Assistant City Manager, Finance Director. We have here tonight with us Rumsey and Tristan from Plant Moran. They are 2 of our main auditors that are here most years. Rumsey's been here a long time, Tristan in recent years. So they're here to present the results of the June 30th, 2022 audit that they performed, and I'll let them take it from there.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight, and good evening. As Ed mentioned, my name is Rumsey Abdallah, and with me is Tristan Plimo. We both work on the audit and supervise the audit for the city of Monroe. Unfortunately, Bill Brickey, the audit partner, couldn't be with us tonight, but we'll try our best to fill in his shoes. There are 3 deliverables in front of you that we would be covering tonight. The first is the annual comprehensive financial report. This is the biggest document of the 3. The second is an audit presentation or a graph presentation that we've put together to highlight some of the numbers in the financials. And then the third document is the report to council, which includes any significant audit matters that would be identified during the audit. And we're going to cover each of those at a very high level. For the first of those items, the annual comprehensive financial report, first off, we would like to thank Ed Sell and his team for all of their hard work and assistance during the audit. The audit is a months-long process, the purpose of which is to ultimately conclude as to the reliability of the financial statements. Our audit through weeks of field work, we have a team of 6 auditors that were camped out here at City Hall, examining records and looking at journal entries, testing, and confirming balances, and we concluded that the city's books and records were accurate and complete, and we have issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. This means that, in our opinion, the financial statements are free of material misstatement and the numbers are relied upon and the financial statements are in compliance with all the rules and regulations. This year, the city will be receiving its 22nd consecutive Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Government Finance Officers Association. So the city continues to prepare an ACFR, an Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. This goes above and beyond the minimum reporting requirements, and the Certificate of Excellence is in recognition for that. So that concludes the first deliverable. And for the graphs, I'm going to hand it over to Tristan, and she's going to cover some of the highlights of the general fund.
Thank you, Rumsey. Again, my name is Tristan Plimo. I'm here with Plant Moran for the audit. I'm going to go over the graphs that were handed out in your packet. I'll go slide by slide. And these few slides will highlight the general fund activity. If you have any questions, please feel free to stop me, and we'll also ask for questions at the end. So this first graph represents the general fund revenue on a budgetary basis. Most revenue amounts remain consistent in the current year. Overall revenue is down approximately 6% or $1.3 million. This is primarily due to a decrease in federal funding. For example, the Corona Relief Fund that was received in the prior year and the DNR Trust Grant from the prior year. Property tax revenue continues to be the primary revenue source for the general fund, comprising approximately 71% of total revenue in the general fund. The second biggest revenue source is state and federal sources, which includes $2.5 million in state shared revenue and $1.5 in LCSA reimbursements. For the LCSA reimbursements, it's important to remember that this cannot be estimated, and you really can't rely on this number increasing or at least staying consistent from year to year. You will note that the city has $11.2 million in unspent grant funds in a separate fund. This represents unspent ARPA proceeds. These funds are reported in a separate fund from the general fund. Aside from that, most revenue sources in the general fund appear to be reasonably consistent year to year. On the second slide, we'll take a closer look at property taxes. This slide shows the decline of total taxable value from 2008 to 2022 and projects out for the next 5 years. While market values have increased with the limitations of Headley and Proposal A, the city's taxable value is limited to the lesser of inflation or 5%. Therefore, increases in market values will not translate to similar increases in taxable values. In the city's case, the schedule projects a decrease going out to 2025, which includes reductions for the DTE settlement and slight increases after 2025. This third slide takes a look at general fund actual expenditures on a budgetary basis. Total expenses for the city increased from 2021 by 4%, or about $790,000. The increase is primarily due to a significant increase in the pension contributions for the year. The city did see a decrease in transfers out of about $964,000, which helped offset some of those pension increases. The transfers of $1.4 million are primarily for the funding of future capital projects. Perfect. This next slide, this chart shows a look at expenditures in the general fund, which are grouped by function, as defined by the state chart of accounts. As you can see by the graph, about 45% of the city's general fund expenditures went to public safety. It is also important to note that the component of expense related to retiree health care appears in the debt service category. The second chart takes those same values and adjusts the debt service expenditures to allocate the OPEB debt by service by function. As you can see by this graph, when factoring in the OPEB bonds, 50% of the city's general fund expenditures went to public safety, 17% towards general government, and 11% towards public works. On the next slide, we show revenues and expenditures trends on a budgetary basis over the past 4 years. The key takeaway from the slide is that as the city's primary revenue sources, property taxes, and state shared revenue, have slowly increased, the city has carefully navigated the expenditures to address funding needs, while still keeping total expenditures in check with the revenue. For 2022, revenues were below expenditures by approximately $1 million, which is due to the increase of the required pension contribution that we noted previously. For the most part, over the last 4 years, the fact that the expenditures have been curbed to stay below the revenue line indicates that the city's general fund has been essentially living within its means. Please know that this does exclude activity related to the DNR trust grant. This next slide has a graph that represents the city's general fund balance by category for the last 2 years. Overall, non-spendable primarily relates to the real estate inventory, any land held for sale, which is primarily the high property north of Mason Run. Committed fund balance represents the cemetery fund balance. Assigned fund balance represents amounts set aside by city management for next year's budget and for future tax reductions. And then the city's unassigned fund balance decreased by about $619,000 in the current year. This next slide presents the total fund balance compared to annual expenditures, along with unassigned fund balance compared to annual expenditures. Total fund balance is about $7.7 million at year end. Of this amount, however, only $3.1 million is unassigned, which is part of that available for everyday spending amount. 2023 budgeted expenditures are $20,435,411. And again, unassigned fund balance is 3.1 million, which is approximately 15.2% of 2023's budgeted expenditures. And the city's policy is to keep that number at or slightly above 15%, which is considered to be financially healthy. 15% is the minimum to operate, and the city is slightly above that minimum for the current year. This last slide are just key talking points overall from the financials. Some of the key takeaways from the year is that the city has adequate unassigned fund balance that meets the minimum percentage. With potential future DTE taxable value reductions, it's important to be cautious with this number and continue to plan for the future. The pension plan is currently 78% funded. The city actually paid over $3 million in pension contributions during the year, which is about $830 more than the required contribution. The OPEB plan is currently 133% funded, which is the result of significant investment returns and changing the plan to a Medicare Advantage plan in the prior year. For both pension and OPEB, it's important to note that the funding percentage is determined on a market value basis, which means that the asset values are measured as of June 30th, and they're not smoothed out over a 5-year period like you may see on some funding evaluations. And again, the city has effective budgeting that we noted before, and the water and sewer rates are in line with the cost of operating the system and accounting for any capital reserves. And finally, the city has an aggressive capital funding program, which includes taking advantage of grants and awards. In total, the city added $7 million in capital assets for governmental activities, which includes roads, and $3 million for business-type activities, which includes water and wastewater system improvements. And this final slide is Bill's, Rumsey, and myself's information, our emails, and our work numbers. If you have any questions after the meeting, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Any questions on the graphs?
Kristen, thank you for the report. I know this didn't Bill our best, of course. I'll see if there's any questions or follow-ups from council members. Councilman Felder.
Yes, sir. Could we go to slide number 6? I know that we have a budget meeting coming up, a special meeting being assigned for, I think, a Saturday session here in short order. This is not to do with the audit. This is to do with us. I think you guys have done a wonderful job telling us where we're at. We all sort of knew this was coming, but the lines are inverted. We expected this. This was coming for years. I'm not saying that there's any issue with how we're addressing this, but what we have been seeing come towards us for these many years is here now and isn't going to be going away anytime soon. I look forward to the budget session. I think that the importance of dealing with this issue is very plain to all of us, and I look forward to discussing ways to realign. I understand that there may be 1 year where we're off. I think because of the pension obligations that were part of the buyouts, there was a one-time increase that's going to be a part of some of this. So this isn't any criticism. This is just to bring awareness of the situation that we currently find ourselves in. Thank you.
I know that longer term, there's, things on the horizon years from now, but I think there's probably a couple of responses. I see Mr. Sell and then Mr. Pastu. Vince, if you're wishing to start
Mr.
first.
Sell's ready to go. I'll let him discuss that a little bit.
Maybe there's some additional information that will help us on this slide.
I mean, with numbers like this, you just throw numbers up there. They can be interpreted many ways, unfortunately. And I don't think we're in the situation yet that you're saying we're in. That number where you see the revenue being less than expenditures by about $1 million is because we chose to take some of that fund balance that we set aside for the effects of the tax appeal and put it into the pension fund. So it's not like our revenues on an annual basis at this point are less than our expenditures. It's just because we made a one-time decision to make a lump sum extra payment to the pension fund. Okay? So if it weren't for that, that would be a balanced number up there. That's it. Thanks.
Fair enough.
Essentially, the point that I was going to make as well is that we're, by and large, from a budgetary standpoint, pretty much at even right now, actually a little bit better this current year because we haven't filled a lot of positions, had a couple other revenue line items that are coming in higher than anticipated. So that's part of the budget amendment that you have coming up. But, going into this, we were, flat. Pretty much expenditures and revenues being right in line with one another. So. But it was an anomaly last year when we did all the early outs and what have you to restructure some things.
And I look forward to the 28th as well, because I think there's things that are coming years in the future that we'll have to start the discussion about, which we already have had started the discussion, so thank you. Other questions or comments? I don't see any. Thank you both for being here, and have a wonderful holidays. We'll see you again soon.
And I'm sorry, I'll try to go really fast. There is one more deliverable to go over, and if I didn't go over it, Bill might be upset with me, but.
Sure, go ahead.
The third deliverable is the audit report to council, and this is the 10-page letter that's included in your packet. This letter includes 3 sections. The first of these, and I'll go over them at a very high level. The first section includes internal control matters that were identified during the audit that we're required to communicate to you. So I'm happy to report with respect to the city's financial controls, we did not identify any internal control matters that we're required to report to you. We did, as part of our work at the Port of Monroe, identify several journal entries that we proposed to management that were ultimately reviewed, approved, and posted by management. We are allowed to identify and propose journal entries, provided that management agrees with them, reviews them, and posts them. We're just required to tell you that because the Port of Monroe is technically part of the city's operating entity. So that information is disclosed in Section 1 of the letter. Section 2 of the letter includes additional responsibilities as the auditors of things that we're required to communicate to you. If we did have any significant audit findings, any significant matters, any disagreements with management, this is where we would report those to you. I'm happy to report that we do not have such items. Most of the writing in here is the required language to basically indicate that we do not have any of those items. There is one paragraph in here that discusses the accounting changes during the current year. During the current year, the city did adopt the provisions of a new accounting pronouncement that changes the accounting for leases. There was a similar accounting change in the FASB world on the commercial accounting side, and on the governmental accounting side, it was actually slightly more complicated because it applies to lessors and lessees. So it was it didn't have a significant material impact on the statements, but it is reflected as such, or the numbers are reflected in the annual comprehensive financial report. The third section of this letter includes legislative and informational updates. So nothing particularly specific to the city, but this is the latest and greatest from Lansing, so I won't cover these in detail, but do invite you to read through them. And of course, if you do have any questions, we'd be happy to cover any of those with you. So that concludes the third deliverable. And if there are any questions on that, I'd be happy to cover.
Any questions from council on the items just reviewed on the 3 sections? I don't see any, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pastu, anything further?
No?
Okay.
Yep.
I just want to say thank you to Rumsey and Tristan and the rest of the Plant Moran staff. You auditors, you think they come in at the end of the year, do their work, they get out of there and they're done, but they're really there to help us throughout the year. Rumsey mentioned implementing the new governmental accounting standard on leases. And that was a pretty big change for us because we've gotten into leasing vehicles pretty heavily over the last 3 or 4 years. But, they were able to provide us documentation and materials and work aids to actually make the implementation go really smoothly. So they're very helpful to us throughout the year, not just during the audit as well. So I just want to let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that in the preview that we had the opportunity to have a discussion when you're talking about internal controls and some items that needed attention. It was a good conversation to see what alternatives there may be and how we address those. And I know that'll be shared also with the item in the report. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Both.
Tell Mr. Bricky we said hello.
Mr. Bastu, next item.
Next item is Mr. Lewis.
Maybe watching on TV may be interested in this topic as well. So I've just kind of put together a brief bullet list item for you. And I also have our refuse consultant, Mike Sapo, and Mr. Kevin Shipman from Stevens Disposal is also here if there are any questions for either of them. I know Michael prepared the contract for us. It's the same contract form that we used the last cycle with our current contract with Waste Management. So I'm just going to kind of highlight a few of the basics and a few of the changes in the contract from last year. There really aren't too many to the form itself. So as you know, we are going to be recommending, probably at the next meeting, January 3rd, an award, a 5-year contract with Stevens Disposal and Recycling Service of Petersburg. The service start date would be July 3rd, which is a Monday. We start right out with a Monday, followed by a holiday, and then so we'll already be shifted the first week. It's a 5-year base contract with a 3-year option to extend, and that pricing was already provided. So if we choose to extend, it'll be at the previously prescribed funding. Some of the service highlights. I mentioned on here, all residences will get a 96-gallon cart for refuse, and that's new. So right now we're not using those carts for refuse, only recycling. All residences will also get a 96-gallon cart for recycling, which is a larger size. Right now we have 64-gallon carts, and like we are at present, both refuse and recycling will be picked up weekly. So even though we have a larger can, it will still be picked up weekly. The one change is bulk items, because they're doing this on a 5-day basis. They want to pick up bulk items on Fridays for all areas, which we're in agreement with. And then that gives them also Friday to mop up any service problems or any issues, missed collections, or any issues that arose from the previous week. So, and that's obviously new. Right now, we're putting out bulk the same day. We did, as part of the RFP, extend yard waste to the second full week of December. So this year, that would have gone through last week, the week of December 12th. So that's something that, even though we didn't really need it this year, more often than not, we do need it. We have a lot of residents that want to get rid of all that, so they're not storing it all winter. So late leaf drop, that is an advantage for us. No change whatsoever to collection days or holidays. We're going to celebrate the same 6 holidays as we do at present. New Year's Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. We will have, and this was a topic for discussion, and what we settled on was there will be an option for residents to request a second cart for refuse, not necessarily for recycling, but for refuse, if they need it. What we settled on was, rather than have those requests start coming in right away, I think a lot of people may not realize just how much they can fit in a 96-gallon cart. That's a big cart. So we're looking at either 30 or 60 days of the new contract before we'll allow you to request a second cart. We want to make sure that you really need it to avoid deploying more carts than we really need to. We will have, as part of the contract, additional bags allowed outside the cart, or in some cases in lieu of the cart. Until we get all of the downtown on common dumpsters, there are some upstairs rental units. Those obviously can't store the cart. We're not going to let them store it on the sidewalk, so they can't drag it down the stairs. So there are going to be there'll still be some bags out, but we think by and large, most people are going to use the cart only, and that should be sufficient for most households. I would note, the contract doesn't stipulate it, but we are going to be looking at placing limits on the number of bags that can be set outside the cart. So that's something administratively the city manager has the right to do. We intend to review that and make a recommendation to you before the informational brochure would go out, but that's something that a limit is not stipulated in the contract. One item that was at Stephen's request, which we're in agreement with, since we're now going to carts instead of everything being in bags, a lot of people might throw in some loose gravel, some rocks here and there that would fit inside a bag, but with that now being in a cart, the possibility exists that could dump in there and kind of roll around the truck. So what we settled on is that things like rocks, sod, dirt, concrete, and brick will be picked up on Friday as part of the bulk if it's boxed properly. Same dimensions will apply. You can't have it weigh more than 60 pounds, but we're going to move that away from being part of the regular collection and into a bulk type situation. We're not seeing a lot of that right now, but somebody wants to get rid of some old patio blocks. We want to give them that option to pick it up curbside. So those more or less highlight the, I'll say, changes from the contract that we have right now. And I think you'll find most of those would be more favorable. I think those larger carts are definitely going to clean things up quite a bit. Financial details, in summary, I think I've presented this before, but we'll just go over it in brief form. The price per unit that was bid for the first year is $165 even. And for reference, the current year we're under right now is $160.08. And so this represents about a 3% increase, which is actually quite favorable to us, especially given what general inflation's been doing and the fact that we're getting carts. I think that's an enhanced service on balance. Right now, we're being billed for a total of 7,454 units. That's curbside, that's 7,172 residential and 282 commercial. We did commit to doing, I'll say, a re-audit of that number. We had gone through about 3 or 4 years ago and done that with Waste Management. Certainly, there may be some other units that are vacant. There may be, some buildings that don't have as many units. Some have more. So we're going to look at that number again. We don't expect it to change materially, but that number is important for Stevens because we need to be deploying those carts. So they need to know how many carts they've got to deploy, and so that unit count is very important. So somewhere in that ballpark is where we're likely to be. And then the contract, the RFP provided for, I'll say, a la carte type services, extra things like if we need storm cleanup, if we need assistance, things like that. We don't expect to use many of them. Some of the things that we are going to bill on either that basis or come up with a corresponding unit is picking up to 50 trash cans in the downtown. Those are the ones that are on the street. We'll either convert that to an appropriate number of units, but we're going to pick those up twice a week, I think probably Mondays and Thursdays. And then we have things like Woodland Cemetery, which we've now committed to taking over trash collection on that. So there'll be 3 or 4 carts that'll be picked up weekly. So a few things like that. I won't go into all the details, but they're more of an internal operation than anything else. So that'll result in roughly a $1.25 million contract for 2023-24, the first fiscal year. And the 5th year price, I would note, just for reference here, is $186 per unit, which is roughly averages out to about a 3% increase per year for the 5-year contract. So all in all, not a bad number. If you were to project out years 6, 7, and 8, you're seeing the same type of increase. So we don't have a big step function there in year 6 where we're paying 10% more. It's more or less linear across the 5 or 8 years, depending on what we settle on. So where are we going next? What's the next steps? We honestly thought this process might take a little bit longer, but we have a clear recommendation for you, unlike 5 years ago when there was a couple of different options you could have selected. So the administration does plan to bring to you a recommendation to award the contract on the Tuesday, January 3rd. And then, as you might expect, staff's got some work to do for a transition plan. A lot of little details. How's Waste Management going to pick up their carts? How are we going to deploy the new carts? When are we cutting off new recycling container requests from Waste Management? I don't think it's fair to be having someone get a can in June and then pick it up 3 weeks later. Things like that. All those little details. And we've got to get the service brochure out, get that put together, get that in the hands of all of our residents and things like that. So we've got quite a bit of work to do. So unless there's any reticence on the part of council, we would like to bring this to you for adoption at the next meeting. So I think, Mr. Pastu, did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered pretty much all of it.
Thanks, Patrick. And Mr. Bastu, I'll see if there's questions. I'll go right down this way and come back. Councilwoman Germaini.
Thank you, Your Honor. 2 questions. The bulk on Friday, so the entire city is going to have the bulk pickup at once?
Yes.
Okay, my second question is, if they got an extra can per household, would that be an extra unit charge per household?
No, not the way the contract reads. It'll be 1 pickup point. So the city's billing with Stevens will be 1 pickup point.
Okay. But pickup, not can.
Yeah, so no additional charge. So if we do it, that's a very good question. If we deploy a second cart, we don't get an additional, per $165 charge for that second cart.
Okay.
That's included as one stop.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Your Honor. The second cart, is that going to be the same size?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple other questions here. The rocks, dirt, et cetera, that are going to be picked, are those going to be in carts or are they going to be separate bagged?
Those are going to need to be secured in bags separately.
Okay. How the details of the contract went from year 1 to year 5 with Waste Management, does this kind of coincide with how the price roughly went up and escalated?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had done some analysis on here. The waste management contract was about an 8% increase from the first year to the 5th year, but we're also looking at radically different landscape
Oh, absolutely.
economically than we were in
Yeah.
2018. So it's very much, we're very comfortable with the escalation.
Great.
That's no concern of ours on that.
All right, and one last question. With the businesses, are we going to get them trash carts, I'm assuming, as well, downtown?
I'll say yes, with the caveat that we're still working towards trying to get as many common dumpsters in as many places as we can. It's been a little slower rollout, and that's frankly just because my team and I haven't been able to focus very much on it in the last 6 months. But ultimately, we'd like to not, even if we deploy those in July, we'd like to at some point have those go away so that those businesses can use the common dumpsters and dump whatever day of the week they would like to. But in the interim, they will be able to receive those carts and will be billed for those units.
Okay, and also some other businesses also set out pallets, et cetera. Is that going to be a problem?
Hadn't really thought about the pallet issue. I believe that would be something that would be like a bulk collection item.
Yeah.
We have to structure it that way. But hopefully that's not too big of an issue, given that Thursday's collection is downtown, and that would be on the following day on a Friday. I would hope they're not regularly setting pallets out and just leaving them on the sidewalk, but
We had that experience last summer, I recall, and it was for a couple of weeks, I think. But by and large, most of the businesses don't put out that kind of almost refuse, if you will, and demolition material. We had that one period where it was a little excessive, to say the least.
we're still going to have to deal with the issues of evictions and move-outs and that type of thing being more than is realistically covered by any contract. A single pallet on a weekly collection wouldn't be a major issue in and of itself. I believe I know, Councilman, which issue you're referring to that we dealt with multiple weeks this summer. That would be the same type of issue. It would have to be a blight-related issue because it will exceed our collection
But
standards.
also keep in mind, just for my store alone downtown, I also put out pallets occasionally
Sure.
because I get my deliveries via pallet. That's why I was asking that question.
Sure. I don't believe that would be an issue.
Okay.
We'll take that under consideration though, because as I mentioned, we're not 100% done with the administrative rules and regulations associated with this contract.
Right.
The contract is a little more broad and allows us a little more latitude than we're ultimately going to take, because we want the community appearance to be an improvement. So some of these things we're going to go tighter as a city than Stevens may be willing to let us go a little wider in terms of the legal contract document. So we're gonna tighten those things up as we go along. But that's a very good question. We hadn't really thought about that one specifically.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are collecting the current, was it 64-gallon containers that we have for recycling presently?
You mean at the end of Waste Management's contract?
Yes.
That would be the assumption. Now, we haven't spoken with them specifically whether they want them back. I believe they would, because they're only 5 years old. I'm hoping we don't get into a situation where they don't want them back. If they don't want them back for some reason, our Public Services Department is prepared to assist with collection of those carts if we have to. Because there are also the nuances too of, okay, what about the people that are on vacation the last week of June? Do they not set their carts out? Who picks them up then if they're not out that week? What if they set them out the third week in July and Waste Management's already come through? There's 1,000 little things that may come up like that, and we know as a city staff we're going to probably have to help mop some of those things up on the margins. We'll do the best we can to get as comprehensive a plan as we possibly can, but the cooperation of our current vendor is expected and appreciated, but we know there's going to be some missed.
There's no scenario in which Stevens would use Waste Management's recycling receptacles.
No, because it's a different size especially. So,
Okay. Now, there was an initial deposit fee that was paid when we received those, when the residents received those cans. Is that my understanding?
An initial deposit? No, that was part of their contract.
It was built
Yep,
in.
we didn't pay for those. They're not ours. That was all rolled in. They figure with that's why a lot of times you're going with a 5-year contract, because they can roll the cost of those over a 5-year period.
Gotcha.
So, yep.
Question about the residential unit audit that we will be performing. We've had issues with duplexes and triplexes in the past. I'm assuming that's going to be part of it.
Yeah. I don't know if I probably won't go into too much detail, but
That's fine.
we basically separated out the homestead properties and then looked at the number of registered rental units that the building department had, and then what was left. City manager and our data processing, I don't know, business development coordinator took to the streets, drove around. There were about 600 buildings that we looked for meters, doorways, mailboxes, things of that nature, to try to ascertain the number of units that were in some of those, and then turn a lot of those over for unregistered rentals. So I would expect that we'll have more of the same this go around.
So where those are present, those will be billed as a separate unit?
Well, that's a policy decision the council is going to have to make, but I can assure you that administration is going to be recommending that, if it's a single-family residential with multi-family units, the first one, like the rest of them, will be, I'm not going to say free, but on your tax bill. But the other units that you have will be treated as an additional unit for service. That'll be our recommendation. Council, and during this interim period, will be, having that discussion with administration about how to structure that. And there may be some nuances in there too. Whether you want to charge them for yard waste. I mean, the yard is going to be 1 yard, regardless if there's a family or a 3 units in there, or whatever. So there's some things for us to contemplate. But clearly, administration's going to recommend that you bill extra for those.
It was a very interesting exercise when we did it the first time. That was the first time I had ever been involved with it, and it showed us a lot of things that were useful in other areas. Unfortunately, it was not too far ahead of the COVID issue, which kind of stymied some of our efforts to get more of those units registered and things like that. So we had a more permanent record, but we'll make another go of it, and hopefully that'll yield the same information it did before.
Thank you so much.
Yep, sure.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just one more question regarding the second trash cart. Just being the devil's advocate here, I know that the residents I shouldn't say residents, the landlords that have 2 units, apartments, are going to request a second trash cart. That's going to be a given. Is that something we're going to, how are we going to handle that is the question.
Well, and that was part of the discussion is, our recommendation is the first one's going to be treated as if it's, owner occupied single person. The second one is, like you would with some of your commercial multifamily units, where they're going to have to pay additional for that service. It's functioning as a business.
But you understand where I'm going with that. Even though we're going to be allowed 2 carts for a single family residence,
Right.
we're saying if he asks for 2 carts as a rental property, we're going to bill him separately for each cart.
They can have 2 carts. The cart's not the issue. It's the units associated
Well, I
with that
agree with you.
property. And that's really what we'll talk about. If they need 2 carts, they get 2 carts. I'm not.
Yeah, I just don't want to back ourselves into a corner. That's the only thing
No,
I'm
that's
worried
what we
about.
don't want to. I agree. Yeah.
And right now, that duplex would be billed as 2 units right now. So we're paying Waste Management 2 units for that duplex as it is. So we're not
Answer
going
my
to be
question right there.
Yeah, we're not going to be sliding backwards whatever we do. Even if we do nothing and stay status quo, it'll stay the same as it is now. We're talking about potentially improving the situation from what it is at status quo. So I don't want you to think that this is a new thing, that if we don't do it, we're going to be paying more money than we were. That's not the case. The 7454 includes all of those up to as many as 7 or 8 units in a couple of places. Those get billed right now as 7 or 8 units. Whatever that building has, that's the number of corresponding units we pay. So
I think in a general sense, you've got taxpayers subsidizing some of those multifamily residential units. And so I think from an equity standpoint, that's what's going to drive it. But it also will drive behavior too. So more of a policy discussion with council.
mm-hmm.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Okay.
All right.
I'm look forward to the conversation on a couple of these items, but also on the bulk items. I think about the same topic about multi-units and 2 or 3 units, and it seems that within a week or 2 period, they're all been kind of vacated. Now you have 3 bulk pickups in the same location. That doesn't always happen on the same day. And it's a
You know,
collection. But we've started looking at that already, as the administration has, and how
And
do we
again,
manage that?
if I may, Your Honor, is, part of that review, along with how we're going to bill those, is also discuss, the ordinance that we have in place and some of the administrative directives I can issue. I do it with certainly council's consent and understanding, but there's some controls that we can put in there to start to alleviating that problem that has existed sporadically in the past, so.
Yeah, there's some communication with the property owner. If they know they're going to have that, it's a simple call. We could make arrangements through how we do business instead of doing it 3 times over. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
All right, well, I again appreciate your time, council, and I'd like to thank Mr. Sapo and Mr. Shipman. They made this process very, very favorable. It was, I look forward to working with Stevens, and appreciate your time. You'll have the contract in front of you in 2 weeks.
Patrick, we'll
Thank you
look
much.
forward to it. And
All right.
thank you, gentlemen, for being here this evening again, as always. Yep.
If I can also just express appreciation also to Mike. Mike and I have worked together for almost 20 years now, and so have nothing but the utmost respect for him, and very helpful to organize the bid process. And I think each of the 2 times that we've worked together, we've got a good structured presentation for council, and probably got the best service for the value that we have there. So, Mike, greatly appreciate it. Kevin, certainly look forward to working with you as well. Thanks.
Mr. Pastor, we have another item.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next item is I'm going to turn it over to City Attorney Matt Buds to provide an update regarding Oak Forest apartments.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The somewhat unusual step of talking about a matter involving pending litigation here in an open session, just because of the nature of the communications that have occurred. And to give you a brief timeline, the Council some time ago authorized us to commence litigation relating to the Oak Forest property, mainly on the aspects of blight, nuisance, property maintenance type issues. And after the filing of that complaint, we did have dialogue with the attorneys and the property management staff and regional staff for the property. That meeting occurred in early November. And during that meeting, there was a discussion that they thought that, mainly the issues were largely resolved and that we could have another inspection to come out. And I received an email traffic back and forth with the attorney for the property that basically suggested that they consider our litigation frivolous, and they've been upset with other comments that have been made at city council meetings. And so we thought it appropriate just to show the pictures, consider giving you that as by way of update, and then I'll give you my conclusions and recommendations at the very end. So I'm just going to walk you through the pictures. Essentially, what you will see, I think, in broad strokes here is a list of things that include missing shingles on buildings, sagging roof members in various places, missing brick veneer, which is leading to rotten decay of the walls behind, wood trim and fascia problems throughout that are unpainted and deteriorating. The inspectors that went out for the city noted that it appeared in numerous locations to be signs of a rodent infestation, gutters and downspouts with either problems of having fallen down or filled with materials that were not performing the intended drainage, and overgrown trees and vines as sort of a general matter. And that's been communicated to the property owners in writing, in addition to what's been filed in the court files at this point. So I'll walk you through the pictures. I think they're pretty self-explanatory, but if you want me to stop at any point, let me know. That's sort of one of the pictures where the brick meets the siding. I believe that's just below a window where the sort of yellowish tan color is. You'll see we have those kind of problems with gutters and downspouts and running down the brick. And then you'll see there at the bottom for sort of scope the rotten decay that's happening below or to the side of that window. Here, I think this one was mainly just looking at kind of landscaping and overgrowth type issues and looking up underneath at some of the issues underneath the fascia there, but I'll pass on this one. Here you can kind of see what's happening with things growing up out of the gutters and those type of items. This one's just about general, I'll call it landscape maintenance. Maybe, again, same type of things here. And again, a similar situation there. Here you'll see some repair that was previously done as far as the brick is concerned. You'll see as we get there that that doesn't seem to have resolved all of the issues underneath. Let's see. Here you can see kind of rotting, deteriorating wood underneath that shutter there. Yes.
Mr. Bud, is that a window? So, or is that the shutter's closed? Is it boarded? Is it supposed to be a window? You know? That's okay. We can go on.
Yeah, I will say I'm not certain of that, but it would suggest to me, based on what you see throughout the property, that that should be a window, but I can't say that for certain as I sit here today. Another point while this next photo is loading is that there are several of the units that are not occupied and that they are not actively seeking to get certificates of occupancy on. That I'm going to say just general material there near the doorway. This is another sign. Here you see the brickwork just falling away and some issues obviously with the wall behind. So we have this in several places, and you'll see a further out view missing shingles. Again, here just the issue of the gutters filled with material. This is the kind of general overgrowth with the landscaping. Here, I think this was just not sealed properly, if I recall correctly, and might be a sign of where you might be having some animals in and out. This will show you some of the rot and deterioration on that beam there just below the roofing material. There we have a gutter that's just on the ground. Another picture of that. Now, you can also see behind there some issues with the wood and the rot that's on the actual structure itself there as well. That's one of the signs. So that's looking at the roof line, and I'll just say our inspectors believe that to be signs of animals coming in and out of the property there. You can see part of that just appearing to be ready to fall off. Here again, looking at the gutters and underneath. And I will say it's possible, Mr. Mayor, as I look at this picture, there may be some of those that were never intended as windows. You'll see one there too, so I don't want to say for certain. This is a sign of one of the doorways, and you can see kind of around that edge of the trim there also that seems to be rotting away. That's another view, I think, of one that we had seen earlier, just where you see what's happening underneath those gutters. And there we have both what appears to me at least to either be that growth is coming up underneath the wood there, having some rotting away, and something growing up above there as well. The condition of one of the doorways. Here again, just general how you're seeing moisture issues around the corner there. Whoops, that's one general kind of overgrowth. Here's a concern that we noted as far as the roofing materials there, which then obviously can lead to leaks and other problems on the interior. Again, an issue with the gutters there. I'll say this is the one that probably stands out the most to me when I went through these pictures. I mean, right there, you just have part of the wall that's exterior wall that's just missing at this point, and nothing good happening behind there. You'll see this is an example where you have the trim around those windows also up, I'll say at least to me, appearing to be untreated and having being subject to continued deterioration because of that. That's a close-up of that other picture that we saw earlier. Again, up above, similar issues happening, and I'll say concerning further up the structure, but again, that brick veneer just falling apart in certain places. Again, material in the gutters. There you can see some gap in the material there at the corner at the top. General overgrowth with the landscaping. There you'll see obviously some problems with the brick work there, and some appears maybe a section that has already come apart. Noted this on a couple of the buildings also, wavy siding, which the inspectors noted would typically be a cause for concern for moisture behind the siding. Noted some foundation cracking. That's another sign if you see kind of the siding coming away from the building there at one point. That one, if you look down at the bottom, again, the missing brick just there out in the landscaping area. And again, a close-up of that. Some of the additional brickwork where it meets there, just not coming flush to the other corner of the property. Some rotting wood there underneath. That's a more wide out shot of some of the problems with the shingles and some of the roofs. Obviously some signs of some damage and deterioration there. Another picture with some shingles missing and falling down. Another picture where you have kind of where that, I believe that's where a porch meets then the side that would go out towards a window, if I'm remembering correctly. Again, obviously signs of damage from moisture there. Whoops. They did do patching, I will say, of the parking area, but we're still seeing some signs of standing water. And I'll see the other thing if you drive through that you see is no action was taken as far as kind of the ruts when people were driving around the potholes as you drive through. So still having some issues with standing water in the parking lot as well. That was one of the parking lot, like the curb stops, I'll call it, that has deteriorated pretty badly there. That's the view around one of the windows. You'll also see missing, I'll say, shutter that should be on the other side of that. That was also something that's happened at a few locations at the property. Another sign of the siding pulling away from the building there, about halfway up the picture. Sorry for kind of droning on, but I think it's important to see the pictures of what the inspectors are seeing when they're out at the property. Again, some more deterioration of the brick around that window. There at the foundation side on that brick. There another sign of siding just missing from that part of the structure. Maybe, oh, there we go. So you'll see up at the top there, missing siding as well. So I think that we're close to the end of the pictures. I'm going to say I think that gives you a good sense of what we are dealing with. I don't want to get too much into communication that we may otherwise have in a closed session since there's pending litigation, but we did think it appropriate to show you the photographs, give you a sense of where we were at. I anticipate the litigation will continue based on their responses thus far, and we'll give you continued reports on the litigation update, but thought it important in light of I'll say the communication, the comments, and the concerns that be conveyed to you in this open session.
Thank you, Mr. Buds. Just a quick question. I know you mentioned that there was a November meeting that kind of generated some conversation. When were the photographs taken? About approximately what time frame?
So I believe they were November 17th. Let me confirm. It's certainly in that time frame. If you give me just a moment, I can confirm that, I think. And to give you a sense on timeline, this was after the meeting, right? So at the meeting, there was some general discussion that they believed that, they had largely been working on some of the property maintenance issues, thought that they had a fairly good handle on it. We said we'd be happy to come out and do an additional inspection. And these photographs are the result after that inspection and after that meeting.
Okay, that's good enough.
I can certainly say mid-November.
That's what I wrote. Yeah, it was after the meeting. That's good. Any, Councilman Moore?
Thank you, Your Honor. Matt, I don't know if you can tell me this, but how many units do they have total?
Yeah, I was going to say approximately 180.
Out of all of those 180 units, how many of them have violations?
So that depends on the when exactly you would be talking about that. So I will say there are a number of different violations, and we can certainly provide at a future meeting a status update on that. I'll say, though, you have to keep in mind that there are some units that at some point in time were not compliant with rental certification, either for not having paid, not having had the inspections, those type of issues. Then there's others that I'll say there are overall maintenance structure issues that I don't know that we would necessarily say, that's a particular unit in question, right? Like if you look at this picture, I'm not sure, as I sit here, that we would, note that on that particular unit as a violation, as opposed to this is an overall structural, property maintenance issue. So that number fluctuates, I will say, but we can certainly get you the number. I think it's fair for me to say I would characterize it as extensive. For the last several months, it's been an extensive problem, I'll say.
Just look at this picture right here. Would that be considered a violation, or is that blight, or either?
Well, I would say I would personally absolutely characterize that as a property maintenance violation. You're missing exterior covering from a building, which is clearly
Okay.
one of the
Well,
requirements.
it's still a violation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm just saying I don't even know if we gave you a chart of the numbers, right? Often if they're doing a rental inspection, are there smoke detectors? Are there things like that?
Sure.
Whether this particular one would make it on that particular unit or not, I can't say as I sit here right now on that particular one. But
We're just seeing the exterior, not the interior.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay. There's no other questions or comments? Appreciate the presentation and the update on the status, and look forward to future conversation with the council. Okay, Mr. Pastu.
Your Honor, I've got a couple items we're chatting about. One of them is on tonight's agenda. That is related to the mast arms. We do have it under council action, and I wasn't here last meeting when that was discussed, but just to get what the council's thoughts are. We're certainly comfortable recommending that you go forward with that, but also understand you may not want to do all of them, or any of them at all. So just to get council's, thoughts on that.
Sure, because we had the, I'm looking for the item. It's item 3830, which is under the council action. Any thoughts, questions? I'll save mine till here. Councilman Lamore.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know that one of the intersections is shared with Monroe Township. And no offense, but I think our taxpayers may be offended if we decide to do some betterment on on their behalf with their tax dollars. That's the only questionable thing I have about the mast arms. I know that they're mostly just aesthetics. They are beefier, according to Patrick, which I have no problem with that. I just think the one issue that I have is just that one shared intersection at 7th and Telegraph. Really wish there was some kind of formula for putting these things and energizing them when the power's out somewhere. That would be fantastic. That would be a deal right there. But obviously, that's not going to be a possibility. I understand that. But that's my biggest hang-up with the one intersection. The other intersections, I really don't have a problem with.
So, we had some conversation about it. I was thinking it through since our last meeting, and I'm somewhere Councilman Moore is. I think there's more than aesthetics. I think everybody understands that, and I think Mr. Lewis covered that during the meeting about the benefits. I mean, while they reduce the maintenance, there's how they respond to weather and other items. They do present greater visibility and in appearance, not from aesthetics, but for motorists and that. So we've started this in some other intersections. I think that they have validity. And then, of course, then there's the part of what they look like and really what the long term would be in the other design, which may be an item that has less stability to them. I'll just say it that way. So we get to the one intersection. MDOT's contacting us. I'm not aware that they've made contact with the other jurisdictions. The one that's primarily within the city, I think that has some shared jurisdiction, is primarily within the city, and I think it's something we should be doing as well. I'd like to see in relationships and partnerships that there's an opportunity on the one to see how we do that together, but that's not where we are. So I think we're here today to make a decision in our next in the council meeting about the one. So whether it's the 4 or 3 or what council decides, I guess I'll wait and see. So I'll see if there's any other comments. Councilman Germaini?
Thank you, Your Honor. I concur with the mayor and Councilman Lamore. I am all for the 3 in the city, but the one in question with 7th Street, I would like to have further conversation about that one, if possible. But I'm not against it. I just think we should have some more conversation about the 7th Street location.
I recognize that with the comments on mine as well, that, MDOT may not just come back, they'll just do it the way in which they would do it normally, but that doesn't mean it can't be done later either, if there's some outreach. So, other comments? You had another item, or, I'm sorry, maybe further?
Well, I'll just start at 7th and Telegraph. They're contacting Mr. Lewis now, MDOT is, when he get his decision. So
Sure.
they never gave him a time frame to begin with, but now the frequency of the calls is, implying that they'd like to make us to make a decision. So, but I'm kind of reading the room that there isn't any interest for 7th and Telegraph at this time. Maybe a partial participation on our part, but not to essentially go forward with probably the most costly intersection and pull the full boat for it when we only have one corner out of the 4. So, am I reading it right?
I think you are. I think, and it's not about an unwillingness to have the mast arms. I think there is a willingness, but I also think that there's probably the opportunity to still have partnerships and relationships in doing those. So I think you're reading it correctly. But I'll wait and see what comes out of the meeting. Councilman Felder.
Yes, thank you, sir. For project selection, did that essentially take place according to traffic volume by intersection?
I'm not sure exactly. Patrick, you know how they came up with those 4 intersections?
And then the follow-up question to that would be, do we have a sheet that shows a ranking of traffic volume by intersection within the city?
Well, that's a good question. Do we have a sheet that shows that? No. Could I figure it out? Yes. The heaviest volume intersection in the city is US 24 and M50. I can tell you that much. That's the heaviest volume, I believe, in the entire county of signalized intersections, followed closely behind with Telegraph and Stewart. Last time I checked the numbers, but most of that's driven by the volume of the main road. So any of the intersections along Telegraph are going to be among the busiest in the county and in the city. I don't believe MDOT did project selection based on a ranking of traffic volumes or crashes or anything else other than that. I think they just somehow just decided, well, these signals are about this age. I think some of it may have been driven by the age of the controller in the signal box. I don't really know. I haven't been able to discern any pattern from them. In fact, quite honestly, when they first contacted me, they kept insisting they had a signal at US 24 in Noble. Until about 4 phone calls later, I said, there is no signal there. And they said, oh yeah, we mean Monroe Street in Noble. So I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to how they're doing it. I think it's just the age of the equipment. I did want to clarify if it's okay. I did ask, because as Mr. Pastu alluded to, this is one of those projects where they've engaged a consultant, and then there's about 3 other people, and everybody keeps calling me, and I'm not sure who's in charge. But the gentleman from OHM, who was the consultant representing them, I asked him point blank today, has the township been approached about US 24 and 7th? He says, I don't believe so. He said, I believe that we felt that the city was the one most likely to want to look at this upgrade. So, I mean, I can't say for sure that they didn't approach him, but that seemed to be the attitude right off the bat, that they seem to either not know that that was not primarily in the city, or they just assumed the township wasn't going to be interested. So I'm kind of where you are with it. I'm a little frustrated with the process at that.
25% theirs, but don't worry, the city's a sucker. They'll step up and pay for the whole thing.
Right. I mean, that's
Like, where do they have these conversations?
find myself like leaning towards where you are just simply because of the information I've been getting from MDOT. And there is no hard and fast deadline, but they're already designed as span wires. And I think they would like to, if they're going to reverse course, they'd like to reverse course as soon as possible. But if you wanted to give us,
The ones that are next on the list to get redone.
I have no idea what's next on the list to be done. I'm hoping they don't decide to do anything further on Monroe Street, because we'll have a lot of decisions to make as they get into the downtown area, because we are looking at some other initiatives, which if there's time, Mr. Pastu wanted to also talk about one of those, but we're not ready to make the decisions on some of those just yet. So I'm not going to press them on what their next signals are, because I'm afraid of the answer.
Patrick, I'll say it a little bit different. It's not that the city's not willing, but we think there's an opportunity for a partnership and understanding that it benefits all residents that drive through the intersection, and there should be a shared responsibility. It's unfortunate I didn't reach out to Monroe Township, and for us to, I guess, to have to track that down for somebody that wants it done, and now there's a time frame. I guess what I'd appreciate is that that message be delivered, if that's what happens here this evening. It's not that we're not willing.
Sure.
It's just there's a manner in which it gets done, so because we have other intersections that the same thing may come up, and it's one quarter within the city.
And likewise, the township may have some signal work done at Telegraph and Dunbar that may be interested in doing that in the future as that one comes up too. So if it pleases the council, we can make the outreach to the township and see what their interest level might be, whether or not they've been contacted by MDOT, and just if the message is delivered that Vince's shaking his head no.
So you have something else within this arena to raise, right, Mr. Pastu?
Yes.
Okay, please go forward.
No, I think, you know what, if we get to the regular meeting, if I'm reading it right, when you get to that item for action, you know, maybe it's a simple motion to approve with the exclusion of the 7th and Telegraph intersection, and we can go from there, I think.
And if that's where it starts, we'll see where it goes, and from the council votes, and then we'll go from there.
Didn't mean to get so animated on that one,
okay.
but I've been
What's the
pretty
next-
frustrated by
what's the
the
next
process
item?
myself.
So the other item I wanted to briefly touch upon is, you know, and I kind of alluded to it last week when we were at our capital improvements presentation, is the two-way conversion of First and Front, as well as, you know, that goes along with that is scoping traffic volumes on Monroe. So Patrick, myself, Annette, Director Tolstead, Annette Knoll, Director Tolstead, and I met with OHM advisors to kind of go through what that scope might look like. Patrick, if you want to kind of just give them a very brief just explanation of what the scope would look like. And our intent would be to bring this back to City Council next week for next meeting for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Pastu. Yeah, that's where we're at. We did meet with OHM. We have a local individual, the local knowledge, Mr. Loveland, Steve Loveland, who works for OHM, who has done several other traffic studies within the city of Monroe. And so we wanted to work with them on scoping a proposal. As you know, the downtown master plan calls for the conversion of streets from one-way to two-way, chief among those being First and Front streets, between essentially the split at Harrison and Macomb Street. So there would be 4 blocks of each one of those roadways, and tangentially looking at that block of Washington Street between First and Front, and probably Cass between First and Front, although those are a little less important, and we don't think those will have a significant impact on traffic flow generally. So we're looking at scoping a project with the understanding that there may need to be some geometric modifications at the intersection of First and Front, because as of now, they just split, the traffic goes in either direction. But if both of those become two-way, you will create an intersection that's not there now. So that will need to be modeled and different alternatives looked at. So this study is equal parts traffic study and geometric study, with the understanding that we need to look at, if those were converted to two-way traffic, what would the traffic flows look like? Where would traffic migrate? There's some modeling that goes into that. And as a function of that, what's the treatment at Front and First, and what improvements might need to be made at Front and Monroe and First and Monroe? And that is because right now you can get by with two moving lanes because you have no opposing traffic. But if you have opposing traffic, do we have enough room for left turns to make it through as part of the regular green cycle, or would we have to widen that intersection out to make room for a turn lane? So those are the types of things that would be looked at in this study. As you might expect, Front and First Street west of Monroe carry approximately equal traffic volumes because one direction and the other, it's essentially the same road. But would that shift? Would some of that traffic shift to First Street? And those are all the things that we need to have modeled. And there's quite a bit of counting that needs to go on. We need to count the morning peak hour, which will be 7 to 9, a midday, which is usually 11 to 1, and then a 2 to 6 period in there, and model multiple different scenarios. So we're looking at a comprehensive traffic study that will do all of the above. And as we mentioned, we're looking to put that in front of you in 2 weeks. We're expecting to get that this week. I just spoke to Mr. Loveland on Friday, and he's just finalizing that, and I think he'd like to get it off of his plate before the end of the week. So we're looking to try to get that in front of you. That is, the DDA did approve a contribution up to $50,000, and I conversed with Ms. Knowles this morning, and I think the intent was like a 50-50 split would be what we would look at doing, up to $50,000, which is their maximum contribution. I'm hoping that we don't need to go to 50-50 at truly $50,000, but we'll see, because it is a fairly large.
It's a complex.
It's very complex.
It wouldn't surprise me.
It's an extensive amount of work. Just traffic counts alone are going to be probably $10,000, and then there's the traffic model and a lot that needs to go with it. So we need to, while we're not specifically looking at Monroe Street options just yet, that will be taken into account as part of the study. I mean, it's not designed to be a Monroe Street study where we're 5 lanes, 4 lanes, 3 lanes, parking on both sides, but we're going to model different scenarios because MDOT's going to require that for the First and Front Street. And we have to seek their approval, not because their Front and First are their roadways, but because we will need to change the signalization and change the geometry at their intersection, which gets back to the question of what are the next signals on their list. We're hoping that they are not looking at Front and First just yet, because we'd like to resolve what we're doing so that then we can come up with something that works for both parties and hopefully get a discount on their already planned in the future sometime signal upgrade, if that makes sense.
So we just wanted to let you know a coming feature here. So, and then rather than just drop it on you that night without much discussion, we thought we'd just introduce for dialogue since we had a few minutes.
Very good. Councilwoman Germaini.
With the study, are they looking at the outdoor dining aspects on the rest? Because we have to widen the road, that's going to cut down on their table access.
We're not looking at it specifically from that standpoint, but when that'll be considered in the pros and cons of what we're doing. I don't think we're going to go through and say how much room would remain. I think it'll just be how many lanes does it need to be, and then we can assist with that. You know, that'll be something, once we determine that, we'll look at what that would do to the sidewalks. I don't want to get the cart too much in front of the horse, but yeah, we don't want to take it to a full-blown design, but that will be something that will have to be taken into consideration as council decides what we're going to do. Certainly.
Yeah, they'll just look at how many lanes you need based on this, based on the traffic counts, and then you'd be confronted with figuring out how you want to make that fit, if you will. So it's so that would be coming after the fact, and if a decision is made to go forward with it.
Yeah.
Other comments? Thanks, Patrick.
Right. Thanks.
Bastu? Sure, a couple more.
On the over the weekend, you received correspondence from me asking council to add an item to tonight's agenda. That would be approval of the memorandum of agreements with both the Police Officers Association of Michigan and the Command Officers Association. That would put back in the contract the cleaning allowance for both of them. When we were negotiating the contracts, so we ended up moving out the uniform allowance, and the baby went with the bathwater. We went to a quartermaster system, but the cleaning aspect of it should have stayed in the agreement. And so after several months, both parties realized there was an oversight. We're recommending to put it back in at $550 a year. I think it's $550 a year. Is that right? Yeah.
Any questions from council? Brian?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just if you can update me as to how you want that worded, I'd appreciate it.
Just a simple, just a motion to ratify memorandum of agreements with POAM, COAM related to uniform cleaning allowance.
And looking at the clerk, of course, we'll have to start with a motion to amend the agenda and then just the topic of the agreements with police and command.
Yep.
Okay. And maybe it doesn't apply, but it just, as you look at the billing for this on our agenda to approve, I noticed there were a lot of personnel from in the command and in the police that had notations of items. Is that something that should have been
In
there?
the
or not
budget
been?
amendment?
Pardon me?
In the budget amendment?
Yeah, the budget, it had names with amounts of purchases. Is that appropriate there, or is that's not
Or the
related to-
bills?
Yeah, and the bills. What did I say? Yeah, bills, that's what I meant. Is those items you're talking about, or would that?
Oh, those
normally-
haven't been paid yet.
Okay.
The cleaning allowance hasn't. So these would be separate purchases.
Okay, but does it apply to this being there or not, or is that just
No,
something separate?
no, those
Okay,
would be
I just want to
independent.
make sure. Thanks.
Yep.
I misunderstood. Thanks. Got it. Other questions?
Any questions the council may have on the regular agenda?
Yeah. Don't see any. We're good? Thanks, Mr. Pastu. And if there's no other final comments, we'll make sure we go with the clerk in the break to get prepared for the meeting. And there's no other comments. All right, close the work session. We have about 13 minutes. Thank you.